Augusta Appleyard first came to my knowledge because of her connection with the Capitol. She is perhaps best remembered at the Capitol as the wife, the second wife, of James Appleyard, who was the superintendent of construction for the Capitol in the 1870s. He was employed by the Nehemiah Osborne Company, which had the contract to actually build the building itself. So James moved to Lansing for the job. During that time, his first wife, Johanna, died, and he married Augusta about a year later. But Augusta has her own very interesting story that lasts much longer than James, and she is also intimately tied to the history of healthcare in Lansing. Augusta was actually born Lydia Augusta Sanborn, so her mother's name was also Lydia, and I suspect at some point in time she started to be called Augusta as a way of kind of asserting her own identity. She was born in Ohio. Her parents were New Englanders who had moved to Ohio. This was in the 1830s. And then they moved on to Wisconsin. So she's born in 1842 in Ohio, but not long after, the family's living in Winnebago County. And then she ends up in Appleton. Her father is a sawyer. Her mother is a housewife. Her older brother becomes a tinsmith. She clearly is bright because she, as the daughter of a working class man, gets to go to school much longer than the average person. When she is about 13, 14 years old, she enrolls in Lawrence College, which wouldn't be a college by modern standards. It would be more like a high school, but it was certainly more education than most people got. She graduated from Lawrence College with roughly the equivalent of a degree in the liberal arts, and then she starts teaching. And as a woman, that would have been her primary avenue if she wanted to work. Teaching started to open up to women in America in the 1820s, the 1830s, and it happens for a couple different reasons. First of all, from early on in America, there's a sense that we need an educated citizenship to keep this country going. We need educated voters. We need people who are prepared to run for office. Now, of course, what's not said, but what everyone knows, is that those people are men. But in order for those young boys to get their feet on a sound path early on, they need educated mothers. So this idea of what historians call Republican motherhood crops up. It is the job of mothers to make sure their sons are well educated and prepared to be citizens. And it's a very short step from that to women starting to work as teachers. There was a general belief that women were inherently maternal and inherently better at working with small children. It doesn't hurt also that there are a lot of women who are looking for work when they are young. Typically, once they've finished school before they marry, there may be 5 or 6 years in the interim. And it also doesn't hurt that communities across the country feel that it is completely acceptable to pay women less. So they start hiring female teachers, most of whom were teenagers, in droves. And Augusta decides to be a teacher because she can, and she clearly values education. So she teaches in Wisconsin, probably for about a decade, which was a long time for a woman. And then, according to her obituary, her teaching career is what brings her to Lansing. About 1871, she moves to Lansing, and we don't exactly know how she found out about work here, but she comes and she will teach at 2 Lansing schools, the Townsend Street School and the Franklin Street School. These would have both been downtown by modern parlance, although it was just Lansing at the time. Lansing was much smaller. And it's possible, just by proximity, she ran into James Appleyard. It's also possible that they could have met through church. We know that James and his first wife were members of St. Mary's, which was a church. It wasn't a cathedral yet, but it was the Catholic parish in town. And we know that after she and James marry, the family continues to worship at St. Mary's, and she is very active in the congregation. I don't know if she grew up Catholic or if she was a convert, but her faith became a very important part of who she was. And of course, this made them slightly different. when we talk about circles and when we talk about lines in communities, I think it's easy for us today to forget how hard some of those lines were between Protestants and Catholics historically.